I want you to imagine something for a second. Imagine you spent the last 6 months alone in a perfectly quiet room.
Right, like an acoustically treated studio or something.
Exactly, dead silent. And you are tuning a cello, you're adjusting the pegs, you're bowing the strings, you're obsessing over the resonance until the instrument is absolutely, undeniably flawless.
It just hums perfectly.
It hums with this perfect vibrating truth. You feel amazing. You've achieved mastery over this thing. But then, and here's the door opens.
Oh.
Yeah. You are immediately shoved into a chaotic, crowded, screeching subway station. It's rush hour.
The worst possible environment.
Trains are roaring, people are shouting, the fluorescent lights are buzzing, somebody bumps your shoulder hard, and right then, in the middle of all that noise, you are told to play.
Wow.
So the question is, how do you maintain your tune when the world is that loud? Like, how do you keep the instrument from falling completely out of alignment the second you step out of the vacuum?
I mean, that right there, that is the breaking point for almost every modern philosophy of self-improvement.
It really is.
We build these beautiful, pristine internal worlds, you know? We meditate on a quiet cushion, we optimize our morning routines in our controlled little apartments. But the second that theoretical practice violently collides with actual messy reality,
Structure just collapses.
totally collapses. We drop the ball.
And that collision is the absolute center of our deep dive today. We are looking at a stack of source material that attempts to bridge what is arguably the most difficult gap in the human experience.
Bridging the gap between auditing your life and actually physically inhabiting it.
Exactly. The overarching mission here is to transition you from being a passive user of your own life, just coasting on default settings, to an architect who consciously designs it.
And then taking that ultimate leap, right?
Right. Becoming a participant in a massive living network. We're specifically zeroing in on two pivotal sections today. Chapter M, which is operator mastery, and Chapter N, collective transformation.
And we should warn you, what's wild about this material is that it merges deep personal development with, of all things, the absolute unforgiving rigor of mathematics.
Yeah, they call it metamatics.
Which sounds intimidating, but we really need to frame the stakes before we even get into the math. Because the premise here is simultaneously terrifying and incredibly liberating.
How so?
Well, right now, most of us, even those of us who think we are highly intentional, we're actually just coasting on pre-installed visible systems.
Like inherited emotional scripts from our families.
Exactly. Or cultural default settings about, you know, what success or productivity looks like. And we walk around mistaking those defaults for our own conscious choices.
Right, we think we're driving the car.
But we're really on autopilot. So today is the pivot point. This material demands that we move from the safety of our isolated data, like the habit trackers and the curated routines, into the messy, high-definition reality of being inextricably connected to other people.
It's asking you to actually live in the house you've spent all this time building.
Perfectly said.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to live in that house, we really have to understand the foundational blueprint. And this is where I need to play the skeptic right out of the gate.
Oh, bring it on.
So when I first looked at this pseudo-algebraic concept mapping system, my immediate reaction was just like massive resistance.
I think everyone feels that at first.
I thought, why on earth are we mapping deeply personal, nuanced human emotions with division symbols and multiplication signs? Isn't this incredibly reductive?
Feels cold.
Right. Like if I'm frustrated with my career, why can't I just journal about it? Why do I need to turn my anxiety into an algebra equation?
What's fascinating here is that we are conditioned to think emotions require poetry, not calculus.
Exactly.
But the argument in the text is that free-form journaling, while it's totally therapeutic, it often just creates a fog.
The fog.
Yeah. When you sit down and write, I feel stuck in my career and I don't know why, you are swimming in a vague cloud of symptoms, and you can't fix a fog.
You can't structurally repair a feeling.
Right. By borrowing the logic and the structural precision of algebra, we stop looking at the symptoms and start looking at the hidden architecture actually driving them.
So you're saying the math forces an objective honesty that, say, a journal entry kind of lets us avoid?
It completely strips away the narrative we spin for ourselves. The foundational, earth-shattering insight of this entire system is this. You are not the sum of your parts.
Okay.
You are the dynamic relationship between your parts. Desire alone does not create transformation. Resources alone don't do it either.
But the relationship between them does.
Exactly. Your specific desire, filtered by your specific resources, that creates a precise, predictable outcome. The math gives us a language to write down the invisible forces running our lives.
So we can finally locate the exact structural breakdown point.
Yes.
Let's make this tangible, because there is this brilliant business example in the sources that completely flipped my perspective on this. Let's imagine a hypothetical listener. Let's call her Sarah.
Okay, Sarah.
Sarah is a creative director. She is working incredibly hard. She knows her designs are excellent, but she has been passed over for promotion twice. She is just exhausted and plateaued.
And if Sarah just journals about this, she might conclude, my boss hates me, or I'm a failure.
Or the classic, I just need to hustle harder and work weekends.
Which are all narrative traps. They just lead to either resentment or complete burnout.
Neither of which solves the structural problem. But if Sarah maps her situation using this pseudo-algebraic system, her current reality might look like this equation value divided by visibility, integrated with, or plus, effort divided by systems.
Let's actually break down how Sarah uses that map. So she looks at the left side of the equation, value over visibility.
Right.
Her value, the numerator, the raw material she's bringing to the table, is exceptionally high. Her designs are brilliant.
But her visibility, which is the denominator, the environment filtering that value, is practically zero.
Exactly. Say she sends her work to our manager, who then presents it to the executives without ever mentioning Sarah's name. Right, so her immense value is being divided by a visibility of near zero. The output, zero recognition.
And then she looks at the right side of the equation, effort over systems. Her effort is maxed out. She's pulling 60-hour weeks.
But her systems, the denominator filtering that effort, are incredibly weak. She has no project management software. She's manually answering emails at midnight. Her workflow is just a total mess.
So suddenly, looking at this equation, the fog lifts. Sarah stops internalizing the plateau as a character flaw. She stops blaming her work ethic.
Because she can clearly see that working even harder, like increasing the effort numerator, won't change the ultimate math if the system's denominator remains broken.
She has to intervene at the level of visibility and systems.
That is the sheer power of diagnostic mapping. It takes the shame out of the equation entirely. It's just structural architecture.
It's a massive paradigm shift. But to actually build these equations for ourselves tomorrow morning, we have to deeply understand the language, right? We have to learn the alphabet of our own psychology.
Right. You need the tools.
And the sources lay out 5 mathematical operators of transformation. Let's decode these, starting with operator 1, which is division, represented by the /. The term used here is contextual shaping.
This is perhaps the most critical operator to grasp. When you write A/B, you are stating that A is filtered by or given meaning through B.
Okay.
The raw content you bring, the numerator, is completely governed by the context or environment, which is the denominator. The cardinal rule of this operator is that the denominator always dictates the final shape of the output.
I want to fix a broken analogy I often hear regarding this. People sometimes compare this to like pouring water through a coffee filter versus a brick wall.
Right, the water gets through one and not the other.
Yeah, but that doesn't capture the essence of shaping. A much better way to think about division in the system is a guitar string.
I really like that. Walk us through the mechanics of that.
So think of your own innate curiosity as the numerator, the guitar string itself. It has pure, raw potential to vibrate and make sound. But that string is entirely filtered by the denominator, which is the support available to you, represented by the wooden body of the guitar.
Okay, I see where you're going.
If you string a guitar wire tightly between 2 metal poles in an open field and pluck it, it makes a tiny, pathetic little ping. There's no resonance.
That's curiosity divided by low support.
Exactly. But if you take that exact same string with the exact same tension and attach it to the hollow, crafted wooden body of an acoustic guitar,
That denominator catches the vibration.
it amplifies it, it shapes it, and it projects it into actual music.
Yeah.
That is curiosity divided by high support. The string itself didn't change at all. The raw element of curiosity remained completely constant.
But the environment filtering it changed everything.
Exactly. Which means if you are a listener feeling stifled right now, your first diagnostic question shouldn't be, what is wrong with my curiosity? Or why am I not motivated?
No, your first question must be, what is the wooden body I am attached to right now? What is the denominator governing my environment?
Beautifully put. So moving to operator 2, we have multiplication, represented by the asterisk. This is termed synergistic amplification.
And we have to throw out our standard understanding of basic arithmetic here.
Yeah.
This is not static addition where 1 + 1 = 2.
Right.
This represents an exponential feedback loop.
Reciprocal enhancement. The classic example provided in the text is creativity times time. But how does a listener actually initiate that loop? Because, I mean, I can sit at my desk for 4 hours having the time and try to be creative, and absolutely nothing compounds. I just end up scrolling the internet.
Oh, we've all been there. Because for multiplication to occur in this system, the variables must actively feed into one another. If you sit at a desk constantly checking your phone, you don't really have time. You have fractured moments.
Right.
True creativity times.
Yeah.
Time requires unbroken focus. When you dedicate an hour of unbroken time to a complex problem, you enter a deeper state of creativity.
And then that elevated creativity alters how you perceive the next hour.
Exactly. You enter a flow state where time seems to literally dilate. The deep creativity uses the time more efficiently, and the abundance of time allows the creativity to take larger risks. They fuse into an emergent property that is vastly greater than the sum of its parts.
So division restricts and shapes, while multiplication compounds and accelerates. Which brings us to operator 3 subtraction. And here's where it gets really interesting, because here is where we hit a massive wall of psychological resistance.
Oh, huge resistance.
We are biologically and culturally wired for loss aversion. We equate subtraction with deprivation, a step backward, a failure.
Our default cultural script tells us that more is always better. More habits, more side hustles, more friends.
More tabs open on the browser.
Always more tabs. But this system frames subtraction as strategic elimination. It is an act of purification.
Purification.
Yeah, you aren't losing anything of value. You are actively removing interference to reveal the essential quality of a core element.
It's like the sculptor Michelangelo looking at a massive block of marble. He didn't add anything to create the statue of David. He just systematically chipped away everything that wasn't David.
Exactly. You have to take away the noise to reveal what's actually there. The primary equation for this in the text is learning minus distraction.
Let's look at that.
Think about the biological mechanism of learning a complex new skill. Your brain is trying to form new neural pathways. If you are simultaneously listening to a podcast, checking Slack, and worrying about what to make for dinner,
Your cognitive load is totally fractured.
right? When you actively subtract the pinging phone in the noisy room, you aren't depriving yourself of connection. You are purifying the act of learning. By strategically eliminating the interference, the learning itself becomes infinitely more potent.
I challenge anyone listening to look at their calendar right now and find one recurring meeting, one obligation, or one daily habit to apply operator 3 to. What can you strategically eliminate today that would instantly purify your focus?
That is a great exercise. And that leads perfectly into operator 4, which is addition or integrative synthesis.
Now, we must draw a very hard line between addition and multiplication here.
Absolutely. In multiplication, the elements fuse to create a flow state. In addition, the elements must fundamentally remain distinct from one another.
Okay.
They combine to create a complete, sustainable whole, but they do not bleed into each other.
The ultimate example of this is rest plus work. This equation represents, like, the disease of the modern knowledge worker. We have completely lost the ability to perform operator 4. We constantly try to fuse rest and work.
We answer emails from our bed at 11 p.m. We take a quote-unquote vacation, but leave our Slack notifications on.
Exactly. And the result is that we ruin both variables. We don't get absolute regenerative rest, and we don't produce deep, meaningful work. We just exist in this murky, exhausting twilight zone of half working and half resting.
It's the worst of both worlds.
To successfully apply operator 4, you need absolute, dedicated, unreachable rest. PLUS, absolute, dedicated, hyper-focused work. Together, they equal sustainability. They complete each other, but only if you rigorously enforce the boundary between them.
Which brings us to the grand architecture, operator 5, integration, represented by the plus sign surrounded by a circle.
The circle plus.
Yes. We rarely experience life as a single, isolated variable. Life is a system of systems. Integration is the pinnacle equation because it maps how multiple relationships interact simultaneously on your board.
If we go back to our creative director, Sarah, her equation was value over visibility, integrated with effort over systems. The integration operator is the circle plus in the middle.
Right, it's the macro lens.
It's saying the way your value is filtered by your visibility is actively colliding with the way your effort is filtered by your systems.
And if Sarah only fixes her systems, say she buys great project management software and works more efficiently, she has improved the right side of the equation.
But if she doesn't integrate that with the left side, her visibility remains zero.
She just becomes highly efficient at producing work no one ever sees. The integration operator forces you to balance the entire ecosystem of your life, not just hyper-optimize one corner of it.
Okay, so we have the 5 operators. We know how to map the board. But an equation floating in the ether is just abstract philosophy. To actually use this, we have to talk about the most dangerous and important variable in any of these equations.
Yes, we do.
And that brings us to the concept of the number 1.
The unity operator. The sources are incredibly explicit here. The number 1 in these equations is not a numeric value. It represents you.
It's itself.
It is the conscious agent, your focal agency, sitting directly inside the mathematical expression. It dictates exactly where you are positioned in the reality you are mapping.
This is where the math stops being a diagnostic tool and becomes a mirror. The sources contrast 2 specific configurations for where the 1 can sit in a division relationship. The first is x divided by 1. The second is 1 divided by x.
Let's look at x divided by 1 first. In this configuration, 1, which is you, is the denominator. You are the delineator.
Which means you hold the sovereign position. You are the governing context. You are stating x is shaped by me. I actively manage and direct the variable.
You are the filter through which the chaos of the world must pass.
But the configuration that generates an immense amount of human suffering is 1 divided by x. In this setup, you are the numerator. You have positioned yourself on top.
Which feels instinctively like the power position.
Right, it feels like you're on top of things. But structurally, it means you are the raw material. The variable x is the denominator. You have made something external the governing context of your life.
You are stating, I am being managed by x. X is shaping me. Let's ground this in a very real, incredibly common relationship dynamic. Let's look at codependency or a highly reactive partnership.
Okay. Imagine someone who wakes up every morning and the very first thing they do is scan their partner's face to gauge their mood.
Oh, man.
If the partner is stressed, they immediately shrink themselves and become hyper-accommodating. If the partner is happy, they finally give themselves permission to relax.
They are operating structurally as 1 divided by variable.
They have literally made the unpredictable emotional state of another human being the governing denominator of their own reality.
Every single day, their internal state is calculated by dividing themselves by whatever their partner's feeling. It is the mathematical definition of self-erasure.
That is a hard pill to swallow.
It is. And it explains why so much of our anxiety feels entirely out of our control. Because structurally, we have handed over the control. We've positioned ourselves as the numerator waiting to be acted upon by an angry boss, a stressful commute, or a difficult spouse.
So how does a listener flip that fraction? Because hearing that you are living as 1 over x is a gut punch. What is the daily mechanism of moving to what the sources call the autonomous variable over 1?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it requires radical, almost uncomfortable responsibility. Flipping the fraction means you must become the denominator of your own experience. When you position the 1 at the bottom of the equation, you are essentially declaring, I witness the variable, I see that my boss is angry, I acknowledge the traffic is terrible, I recognize my partner's dysregulated, but I am the context that determines what that means for my day. I determine my response.
You stop absorbing the external frequency and start filtering it through your own chosen values.
Precisely.
Okay, let's take a deep breath and look at the architecture we've built so far. We've mapped the self. We know how to diagnose our frustrations. We know how to use the operators to restructure our habits. And we know how to position ourselves as the sovereign denominator, x over 1.
We've tuned the cello perfectly.
Yes, it is humming in the quiet room.
And this is where the entire paradigm shifts violently, because stopping here is a seductive, massive trap.
Right, we are moving from Chapter M, the math of the self, into Chapter N, the biology of the collective. The sources introduce a concept called the paradox of completion.
The paradox.
You've done all this internal work, your nervous system is regulated, your equations are perfectly balanced, but you sit there in your highly optimized life, and something feels profoundly hollow. Like it's unfinished.
The core philosophy here is that mastery contains a paradox. It only becomes complete when it is given away.
Wow.
The exact skills that liberated you personally hold their true, ultimate power only when they are leveraged to liberate others. Mastery hoarded becomes stagnant. Wisdom kept in a vacuum becomes brittle.
I think of it like spending years researching, saving up, and building the most state-of-the-art, lightning-fast Wi-Fi router on the planet.
Right.
It's a masterpiece of engineering. You plug it in, the signal is incredibly strong,
Yeah.
but then you refuse to give anyone the password.
Just sit there.
You just sit in a room alone, marveling at the blinking lights on the box. What is the actual point of the signal if it connects to absolutely nothing?
It's a tragedy of isolated potential. The core shift required in Chapter N is moving from internal attunement to external alignment. For years, the personal development industry has taught us to constantly ask, how do I work? How do I optimize myself? How do I maximize my mornings?
It's all me, me, me.
Exactly. But this shift demands you start asking, what am I connected to? How is my frequency affecting the network? You have to realize that you are not an isolated unit. You are a highly influential biological node in a massive, complex system of social intelligence.
And this brings us to what I found to be the most relieving detail in the entire text. Because when a listener hears, you need to help liberate others, the immediate panic is, oh no, I have to become a life coach.
Right. I have to start giving unsolicited advice to my family.
I need to force my coworkers to read this book. But the sources are adamant here. Transformation isn't transferred through instruction manuals or lectures. It spreads through resonance.
This is where we leave philosophy behind and enter hard neurobiology.
Let's get into it.
The mechanism of collective transformation is co-regulation. Humans are biologically wired to sync our autonomic nervous systems with the people around us.
Like an evolutionary survival mechanism.
Exactly. Mediated by things like the vagus nerve and mirror neurons. If you are in a group and one person's nervous system detects a threat and spikes into fight or flight, your nervous system will unconsciously begin to match that escalation.
So emotional contagion is not a metaphor.
It is a measurable biological reality. Studies on heart rate variability show that your internal state literally alters the cardiac rhythm of the person sitting next to you.
That is wild. Let's slow down and look at the meeting room example provided in the text, because I think we have all lived this. You are in a tense team meeting. A massive project is failing. The manager is stressed and starts pointing fingers.
Only gets defensive.
Naturally.
Yeah.
Suddenly, the entire room is spiraling into a blame game. You can physically feel the room getting tight. Breathing gets shallow. Voices raise. The environment feels chemically toxic.
Everyone in that room is co-regulating to the most dysregulated person. They are all caught in an escalating loop of panic.
But then, one person in that room, someone who has done the internal math, someone who is operating firmly as X over 1, remains genuinely grounded.
And they aren't faking it.
Right, they aren't just suppressing anger, their actual nervous system is stable. Instead of defending themselves or yelling back, they take a slow, audible breath, lean back, and ask a genuinely curious question about how to solve the problem. Walk us through the biology of what happens next.
The literal frequency of the room shifts.
Yeah.
Because that one person refused to match the escalating panic, their regulated nervous system offers a stronger, more coherent biological alternative.
It's like a new signal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unconsciously, the dysregulated nervous systems of the other people in the room scan that calm person. The mirror neurons fire, the vagus nerve signals safety. Slowly, the breathing of the people next to them slows down. The pitch of the voices drops.
Wow.
The person with the most coherent, stable, internal state automatically becomes a biological anchor for the entire group. You don't have to shout to take control of the room. You just have to hold your own center.
The sources detail 3 specific ways that your individual mastery seeds this collective transformation. First, modeling integrated response under pressure, just like the meeting room.
Right.
When everyone's inherited script expects a defensive explosion and you offer calm curiosity, you shatter their default reality. You literally show their brains that another way to exist is possible.
Second, creating psychological safety through embodied presence. When your nervous system is regulated, you broadcast a continuous biological signal that says, it is safe here. There is no predator.
You don't even have to say the words.
Not at all. Your posture, the microexpressions on your face, the cadence of your voice, they all signal safety. And neurobiologically, safety is the absolute prerequisite for anyone else to drop their armor, access their prefrontal cortex, and do their own internal work.
And third, holding space for others' fragmentation without fixing or fleeing. This might be the hardest psychological maneuver a human can perform.
It really is.
When someone you love is in pain or raging or confused, our default biological urge is either to run away because it's deeply uncomfortable or to immediately try to fix them with advice so we don't have to feel their discomfort anymore.
But true mastery is witnessing their pain, staying fully present and resisting the urge to rescue them. You just hold a sturdy container so they can process it themselves.
But I have to push back on this entire concept because my immediate reaction reading chapter N was just sheer exhaustion. I mean, does this mean my literal biology is responsible for hijacking and regulating everyone I meet?
That sounds terrible.
Right. Am I supposed to be the Zen master for my entire dysregulated family? I can barely keep my own equations balanced.
It is the most common fear when crossing the threshold into the collective network. But we have to look closely at the boundary the sources draw. You are not responsible for regulating them.
Okay, thank goodness.
It is never about imposing your calm or trying to save people. Trying to force someone to regulate is just another form of ego and control. It is always an invitation, never an imposition.
So I just stand there being calm.
You hold your tune. You offer a different frequency. Whether the people around you choose to match that tune or continue screeching like a subway train is entirely up to them.
That makes sense.
You are responsible for your own state, and you are responsible to the network to not add unnecessary noise, but you are completely absolved of responsibility for the network's reaction.
That distinction, responsible to the network but not for the network, is a massive relief. It changes the goal from I need to fix you to I am going to hold my tune and you can join the harmony if you want.
Perfect. Nicely.
So where does this integration actually happen? The sources outline 3 spheres of influence where this collective transformation scales from the micro to the macro.
The foundation is the intimate sphere. This is your household, your family, your closest friends.
Where it really counts.
Yes, this is where the work is the quietest, but arguably the most profound. It's modeling new biological patterns in how you handle a disagreement with your spouse. It's how you repair a rupture after losing your temper with your child rather than pretending it didn't happen. You are literally rewriting generational trauma at the dinner table.
Then we scale up to the proximate sphere. This is your workplace, your community organizations, the PTA, your broader network. This is where your personal integration starts to restructure systems.
Like the meeting room example.
Exactly. It's actively advocating for a culture of psychological safety at your company. It's changing the operational norms of the spaces you spend 40 hours a week in.
Finally, the cultural sphere. This is the macro-level media, systemic narratives, social movements. It's challenging the dominant scripts of our society, like the glorification of burnout or the narrative of hyper-individualism that tells us we don't need anyone else.
You contribute to the cultural sphere by amplifying voices of integration and refusing to participate in systems of extraction.
And there's a critical rule here. You cannot skip spheres.
Oh, that's huge.
You cannot effectively transform the cultural narrative on social media if you are structurally acting as a tyrant in the intimate sphere with your kids. The authenticity must scale outward organically.
And as it scales outward, something beautiful happens. The sources call it the teacher's transformation.
Yes. When you start facilitating this kind of sturdy space for others, whether you are a literal teacher, a manager, or just a supportive friend, you realize that service is not a one-way street where you just hand down wisdom from a mountaintop.
Not at all.
When you have to hold space for someone else's fragmentation, it acts as a mirror. It forces you to articulate your own intuition. It violently confronts you with your own lingering blind spots. Service actually deepens your own mastery.
Which fundamentally alters how you measure your life. In the early days of personal development, the metric is always internal, right? Like, am I getting better? Are my habits optimized? Am I less reactive?
And that's necessary when you are first tuning the cello.
Right. But mature mastery discards that metric. It stops measuring the self against the self. The new metric becomes, how is my presence contributing to the wholeness of this specific moment? It completely removes the ego from the equation.
We do have to address the pragmatic danger here, though. Caring deeply for the wholeness of the moment can lead to severe burnout if you aren't careful.
It really can.
The sources are deeply pragmatic about the risk of martyrdom. They insist on what is called the return to self. You cannot pour from an empty cup. If your nervous system is fried from constantly holding space for a highly dysregulated workplace, your internal equations break down.
And you just become part of the noise.
Exactly. Service without self-care isn't noble. It is a structural failure of the system.
To prevent that structural failure, the material provides a non-negotiable rhythm for sustainable contribution. It is a 4-beat cycle. Engage, retreat, integrate, engage.
Break that down for us.
So, You engage with the network. You offer your frequency. You hold space. Then you absolutely must retreat. You return to solitude. You integrate the experiences. You clear your own biological filters. You rest. And only then, fully recharged, do you engage again.
We have to stop viewing self-care as a selfish indulgence or luxury.
Hmm.
In this framework, deep rest and solitude are the literal mechanical foundation that makes indefinite, sustainable service to the network possible.
Otherwise, you crash.
A system that constantly depletes itself serves briefly, builds resentment, and collapses. A system that intentionally regenerates serves the network forever.
So what does this all mean? If we pull all the way back and look at the grand arc of the journey you've taken through this material today.
It's a huge journey.
You started as a user. You were running on autopilot, reacting to the world, operating as one over variable, letting external forces dictate your internal reality. Then you did the hard work to become an architect. You learned the mathematics. You mapped your life with the 5 operators. You inverted the fraction to become autonomous variable over 1. You designed your internal structure.
And
Finally, today, you crossed the threshold to become a participant. You took that beautifully tuned, optimized self, and you plugged it back into the collective network, realizing that your physiological coherence is the greatest gift you can offer a chaotic world.
And I think the most vital thing for you, the listener, to take away from this entire exploration is the profound, overwhelming relief contained in this methodology.
The relief is huge.
You do not have to carry the weight of the entire world on your shoulders. You do not have to figure out the grand plan of the universe. You do not have to force the people around you to bend to your will or see the light.
You are relieved of the immense burden of control.
All you have to do is carry your own aliveness. All you have to do is keep your own pattern coherent, because the math and the biology guarantee that your frequency will automatically ripple into the network.
That is such a liberating thought. You just have to hold your tune. But before we sign off, I promised a final provocative thought. Something drawn straight from the deepest layers of these sources for you to mull over on your own.
Well, this is a good one.
Throughout all these equations, all this mapping, the text hints at something sitting beneath it all. It introduces the concept of the handler of handlers and the threshold song.
Right.
The idea is that beneath all your goals, beneath all your efforts, beneath every numerator and denominator you will ever map, there is a fundamental title you have given yourself. A story about who you are that is quietly running the entire machine in the dark.
It's the baseline code.
Exactly. It might be a title given to you by your family, like the caretaker. It might be given by your trauma, like the survivor, or by society, like the achiever. So I leave you with this question to explore as you walk through your day. If you could rewrite the fundamental title of your life today, not as an aspirational goal, but as a lived, breathing reality, what would your threshold song be?
That's the real question.
What is the core frequency you actually want to broadcast when the doors open and you step into the subway station?
It is the ultimate question of the architect turned participant.
Thank you for taking this incredibly deep dive with us today into the architecture of your own meaning. Remember, the equations don't stop here. The transformation continues, the circle widens, and the work compounds. Keep your instrument in tune, and we will see you next time.